Good morning. I'd like to start with reading this poem by Jane Hirschfield. It's called The Weighing. The heart's reasons seen clearly. Even the hardest will carry its whip marks and sadness and must be forgiven. As the drought-starved eland forgives the drought-starved lion who finally takes her, enters willingly then the life she cannot refuse, and is lion, is fed, and does not remember the other. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks more, and we give it. And then this quote from environmental activist Julia Butterfly Hill, known for having lived in a tree for 738 days in an act of civil disobedience to prevent clear-cutting of ecologically significant forests. She says, "Can you make a difference? You already do make a difference. It's just a matter of what kind of difference you want to make during your life on this planet." And one more to bring it to a more personal level. This is from Malala Yousafzai. She says, "One book, one pen, one child, and one teacher can change the world." If you're watching this, there's a good chance that you know me. And if you know me, then you are probably aware that I'm a social worker with a local hospice. But I started my career as a psychiatric technician at an inpatient psychiatric hospital. Basically, I was a nurse's assistant. I woke people in the morning, I rounded them up for meals, I took vital signs, and I did 15-minute well-being checks. I was mostly out on the floor, gently interacting with patients and making sure that they were safe. For about a year, I worked on the intensive care unit, which was for people who were actively psychotic or an imminent danger to themselves or others. I learned a lot working there. Outside of there, we had to be careful about confidentiality because sometimes we would meet them, run into them in public places. So if I ever saw a patient out in the real world, I ignored them, said nothing, just wanted to ensure that their privacy was kept. But one day I was at a blood bank and I'm hooked up to my machine in the chair, and there's a man across from me, and he keeps looking at me, and I start thinking this must be somebody from the hospital. And after a while, he says, "Do you know me?" And I said, I don't think so. And he identified himself as a former patient, and I actually did remember him. He had been actively suicidal, and he spent most of his days just quietly sitting, not engaging, just kind of blunted to the world. But he did improve, and he was able to discharge and go home. And that day, as he sat across from me, he told me that he was really doing well, and he said, I've changed my whole life, and I want you to know that you made a real difference to me in the hospital. And he said, "Every morning you woke me up so politely and sweetly, and it was nice to start the day with that light." Well, of course, I had no idea. As far as I intended, I was just trying not to startle people when I woke them up. I had no intention of being a delightful ray of sunshine or anything like that. And yet, that simple act was meaningful for him, so that he remembered it and remembered me many months later. And I've had people do the same for me. I have had times in my life when I struggled with depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. One way that I have coped in the midst of a panic attack is to just start walking. Just walking. I've walked up and down my back alley crying and gasping. But one night it was particularly bad, and I started walking, and I could not stop walking. I walked the mile to the other side of our little downtown. I walked up those six blocks and back the 6 blocks and back and forth. And the whole time I'm just trying to breathe and I'm crying and I just can't get past this feeling. And it was a really cold night. And luckily I had grabbed a coat as I sort of ran out the door. But I was wearing light sweatpants and an oversized flannel shirt, and I'm sure I looked like a little hobo. And I just couldn't stop crying and shaking. And I realized that I needed a drink. And of course, what I really wanted was a shot of whiskey, but I had not brought my wallet. And so I just wanted to get a glass of water. And so I stopped in a pub, and the host kind of looked at me. I'm sure he was concerned, not knowing what to make of me. And like I said, I didn't look very good. And I told him I just asked him for a glass of water. And he was very kind in that moment. And he asked if I wanted ice or lemon, and he brought me that water. And I was so touched by that kindness that I was able to calm down and start breathing more regularly. And I thought to call a friend. Luckily, I had brought my phone, and I called a friend, and she came and got me and was able to kind of talk me on down the rest of the way, and then took me home safe and sound. But it was that first kindness of the glass of water, and then the kindness of my friend to just show up when I needed her, that I remember. And actually, I feel more strongly about that kindness than I do the fact that I was having that panic attack. I know that every single one of you have some stories like this. Those moments in your life when you were somebody's lifeline or somebody was yours. And sometimes it did not take very much to make a big difference. When I was thinking about this talk, I posted a little thing on Facebook, and I asked my friends if they had stories of a small act that changed their life in a positive way. And my feed immediately filled up with all these wonderful tales of generosity, kindness, and love. So I know this happens a lot, and that every single time it is incredibly meaningful and powerful for people. Sometimes it's these very small acts that we can just absolutely remember for the whole rest of our lives. We live in some crazy times now. I mean, politics are nuts, as politics just run amok, violent racism, an unrelenting pandemic, climate change, economic struggle, and on and on. And every day it just seems like the whole world has gone mad, and we are utterly helpless to stop it. So at least sometimes it feels like that. Let me read the quote from Jane Hirshfield's poem, The Weighing Again. So few grains of happiness measured against all the darkness, and still the scales balance. Have you ever been in a cave or in a place of complete and utter darkness with no light source at all? If you light a single match, once your eyes adjust, you can see the whole room. It's quite incredible. So few grains of happiness, balanced against all the darkness, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks more, and we give it. My whole point of the talk today is that it is these small things, like Malala said, a book, a pen, a child, a teacher can change the world. These simple acts and small joys give us strength to keep moving forward and keep doing the work of striving toward justice and right relation with each other. The work will never be finished. It is the work of life. It is the work of living. It is the work of all our lives. Social workers, like me, love to talk about working from a strengths perspective. The idea is that you identify something that a person does well, an aspect of a relationship that's positive, and you build on it in small increments. So, for instance, my therapist helped me with my anxiety and panic attacks by encouraging me to walk every day. She talked to me about paying attention to the details of the world around me as I walked so that it became a habit. And so that when I felt anxious, I could pull myself through it by the practice of motion and outer observation. And she taught me how to visualize walking so that if it was a cold night or a thunderstorm, I could take myself for a walk mentally and help myself calm down. She built on something positive that I was already doing until I was strong enough to move forward more confidently through the world. The same can be true for all of us, both individually and personally, but also in groups and communities. Just through this pandemic, UUFH has built and strengthened a virtual presence, which is helping us face this challenging time and remain in community with each other. We have volunteers who are learning how to run Zoom meetings and put together online services. Some people have given some extra funds to make sure we can make it through these financially difficult times. And we have some people who are making extra phone calls and reaching out that way to members that maybe aren't as comfortable with the internet workings. In the same way, the city of Hendersonville has begun an Open Streets campaign to help businesses stay afloat while we're trying to keep safe. And there's a Safe Hendo campaign to identify businesses that are making a commitment to abide by safe practices. And many citizens are following guidance on masks and social distancing. We start with small things and build on them. We can't solve all these big problems all by ourselves or in one day. But we can move forward. We can take simple action that in congregate creates larger, more positive changes. We don't all have to dedicate 2 years of doing something as dramatic as living up in a tree. What we have to do is continue to be thoughtful, creative, compassionate, and kind. We are already making a difference. What kind of difference do you want to make? I hope that you will reflect on what moments have made a difference to you. Consider your own strengths and what small thing you can do that might build on that, and see how that works. Plant flowers, reach out to a friend, Take more walks. Give someone a book. Learn about something new. Volunteer for a political movement or campaign. Wear a mask. Find some small grain of happiness. Take some small step. It might create a spark in the darkness and light the way forward to one more new day.